Hello there, this is Louis again, Louis Almeida. This is part 2 of the teachings of Spinoza. We talked about the idea of emotions, but I want to emphasize what we talked about the last video regarding the 4 levels of perception. Remember, it was on page 8, and I'm going to read a little bit about it again. There was a word called recapitulate. You probably know what that is, but if you don't, it means review, or refer, or recollect. But let's use the word review. So he talks about, let's review all the levels of perception that's available. And there are 4 that he found. And he says, I want to pick the best to help me see reality. He also says that the first 2 levels, hearsay and experience, does not really help us see reality as it is. And the 3rd level is seeing how things are put together, seeing the essence of something, how it relates to something else. What does that mean? To see the idea of something and how it relates to something else. If you take a look at or examine a iPod or iPhone, an iPhone, I'll take one here. How did this come about? Here's an iPhone. What a beautiful concept. Here is the 21st century. Now I can communicate with you and you with others. We're using Skype and WhatsApp. But the fact is we can see one another by our telephone. What advancement. So this is reason. Reason uses calculates, measures, and compares. And there's another level called seeing the essence of one thing and how seeing the essence and the nature of things. What does that mean? And this is where I'm going to take us to page 113 of the Ethics. If you don't have the book, don't worry. Just follow me. Maybe you can get a PDF file of the Ethics. However, you can go to the page where I suggest. You might find it, just search. It has to do with the levels of knowledge. On page 113, and this is on the section called On the Nature and Origin of the Mind. Note 2. From all that has been said above, it is clear that we, in many cases, perceive and form our general notions, 1, from particular things represented to our intellect fragmentarily, confusedly, and without order through our senses. I have settled to call such perception by the name of knowledge from the mere suggestion of experience. So Spinoza has taken this perception experience, and now he's going to show us that also this is where we gather information from our senses: sight and sound and touch and smell and taste. All these are wonderful senses that we have. Helps us to survive. But he says also the idea of mere experience does not really give us an insight of the reality of things. We only see superficially. Now the next, number 2, from symbols, example, from the fact of having read or heard certain words, we remember things and form certain ideas concerning them. Similar to those through which we imagine things. I shall call both these ways of regarding things knowledge of the first kind, opinion or imagination. Now, he's talking about the first level of knowledge, which encompasses the first 2 levels of perception. We can't really see life from this first level of knowledge, but I would say I know that all of humanity really lives from the first level of knowledge, hearsay and experience. So we learn from children. As children, that is, we learn from our environment what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, and we learn that what power is. The power to influence others is our direction, where most of us live by, and we're so concerned by the opinions of others. Why is that such a terrible thing? Well, we wonder why man suffers. As Buddha said, man is suffering, and so does Schopenhauer, talks about suffering. And atheism is basically the idea that there's no such thing as God. So man suffers, and if there was a God, man would not suffer. Well, Spinoza is giving us a real understanding of what nature is. What is human nature, and what are the laws of nature? We follow the laws of nature. And one of these laws is the law of self-preservation. The other is the law of persistence. The law of self-preservation, the law of necessity, and the law of cause and effect. These laws manifest from nature, infinite nature, comprised of infinite attributes. In time, as you listen to these ideas over and over and over again, it begins to say, settle in your mind. And not only in your mind, but also your whole being, your whole mass, as Gurdjieff would say. Gurdjieff had some ideas, great ideas. He says that understanding, what is it? It must include knowledge and your whole being, your emotions. So knowledge without an emotion is theoretical. And this is why you must belong into a group. Listening and following just by trying to memorize or try to record and definitely to read, it's not enough. You must have an interaction with someone who knows the way. For instance, some of my students, I had, say, 3 meetings today. 3 different students. One from Sweden, another from Los Angeles, and the other is from Canada. And one of my students asked a question, what is self-approval? And how do you get it? Now, and this is so important because to face our nature, we must begin to learn how to see it. And how do you see your nature? You must believe there's such a thing as an awakened state of being called the active intelligence. And now this is interesting. If we go to page 130 in the Ethics, now I'm going to skip around, and that's the way I work. I don't go from page 3 to, say, page 30 or page 100. We take each idea and develop it into help explain it further. And this is why we work with individuals' nature. I went through the process myself, being with my teacher. I had to learn how to see myself because I had so much self-judgment. The fact of seeing from where? From an awakened intelligence, from the lenses of the mind. Right now, your lenses basically are cloudy, smudged, cracked, marked. You can't really see reality. A good example. Say you're going to the store and you jump on your bike or motorcycle or car, and suddenly you find that it won't start. What's wrong with the darn thing? And you get into an emotion. What is that emotion? Pain. What is pain? A feeling of impotence, a feeling of inadequacy, powerlessness. That's what pain is. And as we begin to look at our nature specifically and use Spinoza, another student said, I can understand Spinoza now that it relates to my nature. Before it was just theoretical. And this is the problem. There are many talented speakers out there who communicate real, clear, profound ideas. And they're good. But yet, there's an old saying by an old prophet, by a man, his name was Jesus. You might say, oh my God, here he is, this is religious. No, it's not. I see Jesus as a man who came to wisdom. How did he come to that? I have no idea. But he came to it. And what was that wisdom? He says, you cannot put new wine into old bottles. I take that that idea to the 21st century and say this: you cannot put new ideas into a mind that's full of erroneous information. Everything that is stored in your memory is information that you've gathered since infancy. You've become prejudiced. You are quick to judge. You go into depression. You go into sadness. You are easily affected by the opinions of others. Why? Because that was your education. Your first authority, the first teachers were your parents or guardians, and they told you what was right and what was wrong. So this is the first level of knowledge, called hearsay and experience. You hear, and you might feel something, touch something. As a child, you go up to the stove, and your mother or father says, "Don't touch the top of the stove; it will burn you." Well, you don't know what they're talking about, and so you want to know what's on top of there. So you try to climb up there, put your hand on the stove, and you burn your hand. That's an experience. That's pain. That's a physical pain. But there's an emotional pain also that happens. It's called fear. Most of us live in the emotion of fear. And what is fear? Now, if you look up the definition of fear in the Ethics on page 174, let's go there for a moment. No, actually, it's on 176. Fear, he says this: it is an inconstant pain. It's not a permanent pain, it's inconstant. Fear is an inconstant pain arising from the idea of something, say, in the future, whereof we, to a certain extent, doubt the issue. So something we fear is, for instance, as a student in high school, it was my turn to give an oral report. Oh, how I hated that. I was so afraid. What was I afraid of? Looking foolish, making mistakes, being mocked and being fun of, looking stupid. And when I gave my talk, it was terrible. One of the other students says, I had no idea what you were talking about. You know what? I didn't either. I was just talking and mumbling, and I just have to express it in 3 minutes, and that was it. And I was shaking in my boots. Why? Because fear overwhelmed me. Fear of the opinions of others, a fear of making mistakes and looking foolish. So Spinoza will give us a book of coming to a higher character. What is that character? A character of intelligence, a character that has meaning, a character that comes to true happiness, true fulfillment. That is possible. Spinoza came to it, and I know he did. Why? Because I'm tasting it now. I'm experiencing this happiness. I'm experiencing this fulfillment. I was married for 11 years, and our marriage was basically not a marriage. It was like a companion, yes. She was my friend, but we lost the excitement. It was routine. And we began to express a lot of hate and anger towards one another. I found Spinoza, and Spinoza saved me. I found it through my teacher. And I remained with him for over 20 years. My ex-wife decided after 8 years she had enough, and she wanted to go back to what was familiar. Her old friends, her way of life. I didn't want that. I found something, and that something triggered my intelligence, triggered my intuitive nature. And that's why it's so important to understand Spinoza. You must have intuition. You'll notice that most people don't talk about intuition because they don't know what it is. There was another individual, a psychologist, clinical, family therapist called Dr. Chevali. You may have heard her. I recommend listening to her sometime. Dr. Chevali. And she has a website, and she has seminars, and she has studies, and she's written books. One book is called what is it called? It's called The Conscious Parent. What does that mean? Being conscious, being aware, being awakened. So she promised that you can be awake. I reckon you can go on my website and download one of the links to her, or just go to YouTube. And just the beginning of her work is truly profound. I think she's one of the few psychotherapists who really understands a good degree of human nature. And she talks about the idea of being unconscious. So here's a parent who's talking about or raising a child, and most young people, I want to be married, I want to have children. Why? Because they see everybody else does and they look like they're happy. Well, that's a true disguise. Most people are not happy. And you know this yourself. Spinoza found happiness, permanent happiness, and that's what I want. So Dr. Shibali gives us an insight of human nature in a beautiful way, and I recommend you listen to her and maybe get her book, because she shows how we are influenced by our environment. One of her patients came to her, and he was in his 40s, and he was upset, and he began to express himself, I can't get my father's approval no matter what I do. And this man was a partner in a law firm in his 40s, raising children, and yet he was still seeking for his father's approval. That's where we are, unfortunately. So Spinoza can give us insights how to look at ourselves, but you need help. You can't do it yourself. You may try. Follow my meetings, follow these tapes, these recordings, and maybe this will help you. But I would suggest writing down, having a journal, and writing down your feelings and the experiences you have, what triggered your feelings. Write down your feeling of pain, hate, and anger. You might say, I don't feel hate. Well, what's the definition of hate? If you get the ethics, you can download it and on the Kindle, but I would recommend getting the book because you want to follow me in the future. What is hate? Hate is pain. The definition is pain. Hate is pain accompanied by the idea of an external cause. So hate is pain accompanied by the idea of an external cause. What does that mean? Well, I feel pain. What is pain? I hurt inside. I feel impotence. I feel powerless. But then someone touches this. I blame them for my pain, so I want to hurt them back. I start yelling, and this is where arguments come up. And it escalates to anger. What is anger? The definition of anger is this, and you can find it on page 182 or 183 in the Ethics. The definitions of the emotions. Anger is desire, whereby through hatred we are induced to remove or destroy the object of our hate. So anger has desire, also has hate in it. When an individual, there are levels of hatred. The highest level of hatred is when an individual actually does harm. An individual goes to a school and kills other students, goes to a mosque and starts shooting people, or at home, domestic violence is a problem. Or just walking and suddenly someone hits you in the face just because they don't like the way you look. This is anger at the highest level. The lowest level of anger, we just want to dismiss people. We find fault with them. And you'll find, or we just walk away angrily. One of my other students, he has a problem confronting a problem. He lives in a home, two other roommates. They're in a home. That's lovely, young people. They're only in their 20s. But one of the brothers, there are two brothers and himself. A younger brother has this habit. He doesn't like to wash his dishes, so they pile up on the sink. And my student is afraid to confront him about it. Why? Because he doesn't want to cause pain. Because he sees this younger brother, the younger brother, is being picked on by the older brother. So he doesn't want to add the pain to this roommate. And I said, and my student, I'll call him Peter. I say, Peter, you must face your feelings and your emotions. You must become in touch with your emotions. Peter lives from his intellectual center. And this is where Goethe talks about the three levels of centers that we live by. There's the intellect, the emotional, and the physical. You favor one of them. I was more emotional and very little intellectual. This Peter is highly intellectual and doesn't like his emotions and doesn't like to express them, and doesn't like to confront people because he doesn't know what's going to happen. They might start screaming at him. And yet, Peter is 6'4", weighs about 250 pounds. He's a big man and muscular. What's he afraid of? Rejection, emotional confrontation. You might be one of those individuals. And there are other individuals who are emotional. They need to learn how to think and come to their mind. So you can see, this is an example. We start off with pages 3 through 5 in the first recording. And now we're going forward, and I'm going to skip around. Why? Because we need your nature, and I'm going to use other people's examples of their nature, and you might be able to relate. Hopefully, this will stimulate you. Thank you for listening. This is a little longer than the last meeting, but I think 20 minutes is about the max we can do. Bye for now, and I'll see you next time.